So I thought I had a pretty solid handle on Air Canada Aeroplan. I've transferred hundreds of thousands of points there, booked many incredible trips with their program, and I was pretty confident on what I knew. But then I sat in on Moli's Aeroplan presentation at the Points Travel Festival in Toronto, and I realized there were layers to this program that I still hadn't fully appreciated. So in this episode, we're going to do a deep dive on Aeroplan, how it works, why it can be so valuable for US-based travelers, and how its airline partners' routing rules and stopover feature can help to unlock some pretty creative trips. But we also get into aspects of Aeroplan that can be quite frustrating if you're not aware of them. But my favorite part of this conversation is a little known trick that may help you avoid all of those frustrating pesky change or cancellation fees altogether. So if you've ever been like me and thought that you already knew everything you needed to know about Air Canada Aeroplan, I promise you this episode will help revolutionize the way that you travel in the future. Welcome to the BoldlyGo Podcast. I'm your host, DeAndre Coke. I have a guest I am super excited to introduce to all of you all today. But before I get to introducing him, a few quick reminders and housekeeping reminders as always. Remember, you can catch all these episodes in their full entirety on our YouTube channel, as well as the fact that for those of you that only watch on YouTube, don't forget every Friday we release our quick hits. That's our audio only news in the world of points and miles and travel of the week. And that comes out audio only, so Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Amazon Podcast, wherever you catch your audio podcasts, you can catch those every single Friday as well. And for those who are new to our channel and want to go back through our backlog but aren't sure what episodes are most pertinent to you, or you have certain things you want to look up like Maldives trip, Fiji, Singapore, different stories, flight strategies, hotel strategies, Amex, Chase, whatever it may be, you can actually go to our podcast library. We have all of these things linked in our show notes. Our podcast library, you can search for anything and everything that's been on our show, as well as you can hit certain buttons for beginner or expert or flight strategies or points and miles mindset, and it'll take you through the catalog of all of those episodes. And we have our timestamps now as well. So you always have the ability to go back or forward. If you have a point that you want to get back to or save or whatever it may be, we have our timestamps in our show notes as well. And wherever you're watching or listening to this, please don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, and as always, I love a 5-star rating and review. Now, the guest that we have today was someone that I met at the Points Travel Festival in Toronto. And this was a conference that was all points and miles based, and it was from the founders of the Chicago Seminar. So they're also doing the Points Travel Festival Chicago. However, this was really catered towards Canadians in a way, but they kind of had 3 tracks. They had the Canadian points and miles track, they had like global points and miles track, and then like some US strategies as well. Well, there was a section, or one of the breakout sections, that was all about Aeroplan. And I know Aeroplan, as we all probably know, right, Canadian airline, but honestly, it's probably one of my favorite places to transfer points to, one of my favorite transfer partners for many reasons. And Moli, who is our guest today, gave a full deep dive, hour-long just presentation on all things Aeroplan. And I was like, holy crap, there were so many things that I thought I knew that I didn't know, and so many new things that I learned that I was like, Moli, I have to have you on the show. So Moli, welcome to the BoldlyGo Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Moli. I mean, we're going to get into a lot of really cool things for today. And I think the great things for listeners is, while, as I mentioned at the outset, right, Aeroplan, you think Canadian airline, but the value in the points and miles community is huge. And when you know just some of these nuances and tips and tricks that you know, I think that really can expand the use of Aeroplan. And I want to go through and talk about some basics of Aeroplan. But before we get there, let's talk about some background and basics of yourself. Where do you live? What do you do for a living? And how'd you get into the points and miles world in general?
Yeah, I live in Vancouver, BC. I do a lot of flying within Canada, between Vancouver and Toronto. So you'll find me in either one of those 2 cities. In terms of how I got into it, I grew up in Singapore. And I had to go to university in Vancouver, BC. And it's a long flight to do in economy class. And the entire summer holidays, I spent every day looking for ways to find business class tickets. Turns out that US Airways, which is now American Airlines, so that became American West and then American Airlines, They were offering a fantastic deal for about $1,200 round trip business class to and from Vancouver. And actually, buying the miles was cheaper than paying for one economy class ticket. So I bought two business class tickets at the same price as one economy ticket. And that's how I started my journey into the world of miles and points.
I absolutely love that. So that was your kind of start. I mean, having to figure out transportation back and forth. I feel like that's a way that some of us get into the points and miles space is we have to figure out how we're going to do this and how we can do it a little bit more comfortably as a way to do it. Now, how did you particularly become an expert specifically so much in like Aeroplan? I know that, of course, or in Canada in general, there's a few different airlines that are in the points and miles space, but why Aeroplan specifically?
Yeah, I mean, there are really only three airlines in the Canadian ecosystem. Air Canada being our global international carrier that is the only airline that practically flies across the world. WestJet does have international destinations, but they're growing. And their loyalty program makes Delta looks really amazing. Their loyalty program is as bad as it gets, honestly. And Porter's best loyalty program is actually Alaska. And beyond the fact that Porter is still growing on the West Coast, they're still primarily an East Coast carrier. You know, Porter was not my primary source of loyalty program, and I'm also West Coast based, so Porter just started flying into Vancouver, BC, maybe like a year or 2 years ago. So Air Canada was a national contender being a Canadian, and my requirements to be traveling globally, since my family was across the world, that lended me to be an expert in Aeroplan's program.
Got it. And let me ask you this, Moli. For our listeners, there's a lot of our listeners who are seasoned veterans in the points and mile space. But we also have people who this could be their day one first episode they ever hear, or they're in their first month or first 6 months or first year of points and miles. And obviously we know the points and miles world is so intertwining and just changing in all these different things. So while people, of course, and especially in the U.S., are familiar with American Airlines or the Alaska or the Delta or United, or they've heard of, Emirates and Q Suites and all these different things, can you talk through a little bit, before we get into the mechanisms of how Aeroplan works, what makes Aeroplan one of the most useful airline programs to understand? Why is it so valuable to understand? I'm going to also throw in some feedback and thoughts that I have, but I want to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so the real powerful aspect of Aeroplan is their multiple partners. I think they partner with something like 50 different airlines across the world. They're extremely flexible routing rules. You can basically book anything you can imagine. I say within reason, but within very relaxed reasoning. They're extremely flexible in their routing rules. And the fact is, they're Starline's partners. They have a global network connectivity. You can go from anywhere to any place using Aeroplan points. I don't think there's any country in the world that you cannot fly using Aeroplan. So that combination makes it a very lethal combination in the space of award bookings and award travel. And for the US folks, they transfer from every major bank, I think. I don't think there's any bank that does not transfer to Aeroplan. Every hotel transfers to Aeroplan. Overall, it is extremely easy to earn those points and extremely easy to burn those points.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, because I think the fact that no matter what ecosystem you've started with, if you're in points and miles, whether you started with Chase or you started with Amex, or maybe it's Capital One, or you've been building all of those, and now you've just started with Citi or Built or whatever it may be. I mean, you can get points to Aeroplan so easily. And I found that Aeroplan is one of the few airlines I don't really worry about having points stuck there. And I've had points stuck there a number of times for a variety of reasons. Last year, for those who follow the show, know that when I was trying to plan, or maybe it was 2 years ago, when I was trying to plan flights to Bali and Singapore, I ended up moving points, and it was due to a phantom booking, and had 230,000 points stuck at Aeroplan because I thought I was going to book something through Ethiopian Airlines through Aeroplan that wasn't there. So 230,000 points stuck at Aeroplan. Most people would be like, oh my God, when am I ever going to use this? This is one of the few airlines I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to be using this. And it ended up just being moved to booking our honeymoon, part of our honeymoon as well. I think that's how we actually flew to Hong Kong, maybe. Either way, I agree with you. The fact that it's so flexible and the fact that it's so easy to get points there and use these points almost anywhere in the world is fantastic. But what are some of the key basics, Moli, that listeners need to know about Aeroplan's award pricing, just to kind of get an understanding? Because obviously, award pricing in general can be such a crazy dynamic from airline to airline.
Yeah, so I want to start off with like a theoretical aspect I think that drives Aeroplan's redemption system and the entire Aeroplan program. Keep in mind that the new Aeroplan that launched maybe 6 years ago, it was designed by a guy called Mike Nasser. And Mike Nasser was actually in our Flyer Talks community. He was in that community. He was very active from a very young age. So the designer of Aeroplan, the original designer, is actually someone who's heavily invested into the program space itself. And he wants to create those opportunities to get those outsized values. So when you're designing that pricing structure that Aeroplan has, he's made that structure in mind to allow users to get those outsized value opportunities. The biggest one being, of course, that there are only four regions in the Aeroplan award chart. I think it's North America, South America, Atlantic, and Pacific Oceans, or Pacific regions. And the amount of miles that you spend on any award redemption booking depends entirely on how many miles you travel between any 2 points within any two regions. So there's a separate award chart from North America to South America, to Pacific to Atlantic. And for any other permutation, there's its own dedicated award chart. And within those award charts, of course, the amount of miles vary depending on economy, business, or first class travel. And in some cases, of course, which partner lane you're flying.
So with that being said, what kind of things should people be looking out for, right? I mean, I know obviously surcharges, fees are going to kick into place. I know there's restrictions. There's certain things you can do, you can't do. One of the things, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but obviously unlike booking with an American Airlines or a Delta, when you want to have a change for your flight or a cancellation of your points booking, right? There's fees involved with that, which can scare some people sometimes. So what are the things that travelers should be looking out for as they start diving into this world of Aeroplan?
Yeah, there are a few frustrating aspects which are, I'd say, foreign to Americans in general. One, as you pointed out, change fees. Change fees, I think, vary between $75 and $125, depending on how you make the change, either online or on the phone, and how far in advance you make that change. Incredibly frustrating to pay that change fee, especially because we typically optimize over time. We find something and we keep on optimizing, but we aren't ever sure if we'll get that perfect optimization. So we want to keep flexibility, but also end up paying lots of change fees in that situation. You can always pay a few more miles to avoid that change fee, but that's again a risk benefit aspect that you have to consider when deciding what you want to do. The call center has really long hold times. 3, 4, 5 hours are completely normal. So making a change is not like, hey, you found something online, let me make a change, let me call up Aeroplan. It's going to be 6 hours of hold. And you might lose your seats in that process if it's like a coveted redemption coming in as well. There's really nothing Aeroplan has done about that. It might be by design that they make it super hard to call in. Changing awards online is up and coming. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I find it doesn't work more often than it does. So calling in becomes the only real solution there. And they have small fees, right? They have a $39 phone booking fee and a $39 partner booking fee, I think. And their US taxes make no sense at all. I think it's a money grab. But Delta charges you $5.60, I think. American charges you $5.60, I think. United is $5.60, and Air Canada is like $50 or some number like that. Like it makes no sense at all, but it is what it is. And then you pay your partner booking fee on top of that $50 fee. So those are the only really weird things about Air Canada. But there are no fuel surcharges. You're never going to pay carrier surcharges. So you do save good money on taxes and fees as well, if it comes down to that. But that $100 change fee, the call center hold times, and the call center is not 24 hours. So if you're like in Maldives and you're like, oh my God, I've got this new, award space on Emirates business class that you want to capture, you got to wait till Canada wakes up and make that change. And if it's gone by then, it's gone by then, and you get nothing you can do to get that seats back again.
Okay, so those are some really good pain points to make sure we know about, and I'm kind of bummed about the having to call it on the change side. That's going to lead into something else I wanted to talk to you about that I'm dealing with right now, so I'm already annoyed for myself with this. But let me ask you this. So we talked about the negative aspects, but where does Aeroplan offer the strongest value when it comes to like business and first class travel. And I do want to also talk about some sweet spots as well, but we talk about these kind of hiccups, these pain points, these issues, but I know there's a lot of strong value. So where are you seeing, Moli, a lot of that, the strongest value for the premium flying experiences?
Yeah. First of all, East Coast to Europe is 60,000 points in business class one way for the shorter flights. Even for longer flights, it's typically less than 75,000 points. I think overall great value once you find those coveted award seats. West Coast to Japan is 55,000 points. Extremely good value with that Air Canada flexibility that we all desire. That's also really good value. But that's your good opportunities, right? There are other opportunities that exist, but you have to look beyond just the more common redemptions. One great example is, we heard this devaluation coming in this month actually, which raised the award prices for some situations. But it turns out that you can actually go from Asia to South America via North America and actually pay fewer points than just ending your trip in North America. So like those opportunities still exist, and those opportunities are primarily around places that Air Canada is not really competing against. You won't be flying Air Canada from Tokyo to Bogota. So that's where those opportunities lie, because they just haven't like thought of that as a potential sort of opportunity for devalue that redemption itself. So those are the really good strong points there. There's some standard Star Alliance benefits that you should be aware of, right? One is Air India. We all love to hate Air India, but their new planes are genuinely good. They're genuinely comfortable. They compete against the best of the best. Indian hospitality is unmatched. And Air Canada is really good at giving that Air India space out to its members, that standard redemption policies. They also partner with Virgin Australia, which is a good thing to keep in mind because they have Qatar Airways aircraft from Australia to Doha. And so you could end up in a Qatar Airways aircraft flying Virgin Australia through an Aeroplan redemption. So that's also really good, I'd say quirky sweet spot available if you want to get that Qatar Q suites, especially with all the new restrictions out right now, flying Qatar Airways as well.
So I want to go back to what you just mentioned about the Tokyo and Bogota, Colombia aspect. So just if I'm understanding you correctly, are you saying, right, Air Canada doesn't really have much competition there, and so you can actually find routing. I'm not saying this is going to be definitive concrete every single day, every single flight, obviously, for those listening, but in general, you can find bookings that will take you from Tokyo to Bogota. Now, is that with a connection somewhere in the U.S.? So someone that's perhaps struggling to figure out how to get to Japan or Tokyo, business class, enough people, maybe they can do a positioning flight down to Bogota as an example or something along those lines. Is that kind of what you were getting at, just to clarify?
Not quite. Say you're based in Los Angeles, as an example, and you find this really good award flight to Tokyo, or say even beyond Tokyo. And you know what? You're now in Japan, you're enjoying a Japan vacation, you want to go back to Los Angeles, and you have to go to South America in the future as well, right? So Tokyo to Los Angeles might be 75,000 points, but Tokyo, LAX, Bogota, Lima, with a stopover in Los Angeles, is only 95,000 points. So for 20,000 points, you can add that South America option quite easily, which is not that many more miles for a much larger sort of combining two trips into one trip opportunity there.
So that's a perfect segue into stopovers, because Moli, what in the world is a stopover, and what's Aeroplan's rules around what you can and cannot do with them?
So there are three things to keep in mind when booking Aeroplan award tickets. One is a segment. A segment is a flight between any two cities. So Singapore, Vancouver would be a segment. Vancouver, San Francisco would be one single segment. Also, there's some flights which are, for example, I think Gulf Air has a Bahrain to Bangkok flight via Singapore. If you book Bahrain to Bangkok, it's one segment. It's not two segments, even though the flight has a layover in Singapore. A layover is basically the distance between any two segments would be less than 23 hours and 59 minutes. So if you have a layover, say from Singapore to Los Angeles via Hong Kong, and your layover in Hong Kong is less than 24 hours, or your time in Hong Kong is less than 24 hours, then that would be considered a layover. A stopover is basically just a layover, but your time in that city extends past 24 hours. With Aeroplan, there is a North America exception, which is a very common exception, I think, across North American carriers. Layovers are defined less than 4 hours if the city is in North America or if your flight's domestic, and anything more than 4 hours would be stopover if your flight is domestic. But in general, it is actually a 24-hour clock that we use. So layovers are free. You can add up to, I think, 5 layovers on each side of your journey at no additional cost as long as you stay within the 24-hour time boundary. A stopover that goes beyond 24 hours and less than 45 days costs 5,000 miles extra on top of your award chart. So, as an example, Asia to South America, I'm going to use that example because I love that example. If you fly less than 11,000 miles to go from Asia to South America, your business class redemption is 90,000 points. And you can add a stopover anywhere along that journey for 5,000 points extra. It doesn't matter where you add that stopover. And actually, I'm going to correct myself over here because that example I said, LAX stopover, stopovers in North America are explicitly not permitted by Aeroplan. And I want to correct myself on that. What you really can explore doing is adding a stopover somewhere in Asia as a second destination type things. Or if you live in Europe or Asia, that's obviously a huge opportunity for you as well. And so that stopover gives users that flexibility to explore multiple cities within North America, anywhere in the world ultimately, other than North America. Or if you live outside of North America, if you live in Europe or Asia, that's where you can really get more than sort of 2 vacations in that one-way journey elements.
Yeah, and I think a perfect example of this, and you gave some great ones, is so my wife and I, in August of this year, we're going to be doing Turkey, specifically Cappadocia with the hot air balloons. Then we're doing Malta, and we're doing Zurich. And so we knew we wanted to do Turkey and Malta, and of course we were trying to figure out the routing of how to get back home. And we found that, when we're looking at basically how to get back from Europe to America, there were great flights and options from Zurich to, I think, JFK. Well, we knew we were going to be in Malta, so what we ended up doing was we booked Malta to Zurich as a stopover, and then we're going to stay in Zurich for either 2 or 3 days and go from Zurich to JFK. And so instead of being 70,000 points per person for the business class flight back, it was only 75,000 points per person. And you would have never found Malta to JFK like that in that way. So by simply saying, hey, let's add Malta or Zurich as a stopover, that allowed us to do that for only 5,000 more per person and gets us an experience in another country. So I think the Aeroplan stopover is a really unique strategy to kind of to help create positioning flights, or as you said, extend the vacation or enhance the vacation while you're there. But I'm curious, can you talk through the process, because it's not as intuitive to actually book the stopover as someone might think. It's not difficult, thankfully, with Aeroplan, but how do you actually do it?
Yeah, when I think of stopovers, if I am especially based in North America, in Vancouver myself, I look at where I want to actually travel to. Perfect example, I am considering going to Africa for my 3rd-year anniversary next year, actually, and doing the safari trip. And we want to explore a few cities in Africa. We're going to take that vacation maybe 2 weeks of the year, make it a long trip, explore some cities. And keep in mind, it's one stopover per side of the journey. So in any round trip journey, you can do 2 separate stopovers. So there's an opportunity to visit 3 separate cities. Now, being in Africa, with Star Alliance partners, you're looking at Ethiopian, Egyptair, and South African ultimately. So one opportunity for me is to do a stopover in Cairo and explore Cairo city before continuing onwards to my final destination. And on the way back, explore Ethiopia before coming back home to North America. So once I found those individual flights from North America to Egypt and then onwards to my final destination, and then back to Addis and then back to North America, I would find those flights individually, confirm those seats are available, and then make the booking online on Aeroplan. The really amazing thing about Aeroplan is that you are allowed to book stopovers online, which I think is quite a good benefit for us. But the actual, again, once you've found those individual flights to book, the stopover booking experience is actually really straightforward. The only confusing thing that catches me every single time is you type in number of days you want to be in a particular city, And I don't know how to count midnights and early morning departures and everything. So if your flight doesn't come up on the first search, just plus minus 1 day on that stopover time, and it'll likely come up after that.
And from the range standpoint, did you mention, is there a cap on how long the stopover can be? Because I know, for instance, I think with ANA, it can be, I believe, up to maybe 6 months. You had mentioned 45 days before. Is that the cap, or is it just more points if it goes over 45 days?
Nope, that's the cap. And this is where things are slightly more, I think, technical. The cap is 45 days. But if you go beyond that 45 days, it will not be considered a stopover. It'll be considered as two separate award bookings into one ticket. So you could still do it if you want to do it. But again, the benefits don't really make sense at that point in time. You're just paying the additive pricing between the two cities.
Hey everyone, quick break from the episode. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're listening on so you never miss an episode. And if you've gotten any value so far, it would mean the world if you left a quick rating or review. It helps more people discover the show and keeps us motivated to keep creating great content. Also, if you're feeling stuck or want help with points and miles, whether it's picking your first card, planning a big redemption, or even having someone book it all for you, we've got you covered. There's a link in the show notes to schedule a free points and miles consultation. Just fill out a quick questionnaire, tell us your goals, and we'll take it from there. And don't forget, our newsletter and private Facebook group are great ways to stay on top of breaking news, updated card offers, and tips that don't always make it into the podcast. You'll find those links in the show notes as well. Now, back to the episode. So, okay, let me ask you this, Moli. So let's take my example of going from Malta with a stopover in Zurich to New York. And let's just say hypothetically, I was like, you know what, I want to stay in Zurich for a month. So we book from Malta to Zurich, and we do a 30-day stopover in Zurich to go to JFK. Well, what if something has changed and either I want to leave earlier or whatever it may be? How difficult, or not maybe difficult, because you already talked about the change process, but, or let's just say I decide I want to stay in Zurich forever. I don't want to take that New York leg. Can you talk through what does that look like in practicality if that stopover needs to adjust? Because obviously it's great if you say, hey, let's book for 45 days, but a lot can happen in 45 days that might change what you need to be doing next. So what's the impact to your points or your options in a scenario like that?
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind is that, take of this what you will, but the IT systems allow you to do a lot of things. The blocker is actually the agent on the phone who you're talking with. A change like this would not be permitted online. You'd have to call in. So once you get to a phone agent, it's really the agent's discretion on how they want to approach the situation. Changing a date, maintaining the same routing, super straightforward, very easy, no issues, as long as you stay within that 45-day time period. Where things get complicated is, for example, say you're now in Zurich and you find, Air France business class instead to get back to Kennedy. You want to cancel your Zurich, New York flight. Technically, it is possible to cancel your stopover flight and you get the refund of the miles as if you'd have spent Malta to Zurich. I have done it before. I have a lot of India examples because I book that most often. I booked a domestic flight in India, canceled my connecting flight. I got all the miles back beyond that short flight, which I actually flew. Will the agent like to do it? Will the agent allow you to do it? I don't know. But the IT systems definitely think it is possible, and I've done this in the past as well. You could change your destination as well. You could decide that you want to go to Boston instead of Kennedy, or even LAX instead of Kennedy. Once again, you probably go into a different distance band. You pay the miles difference, you pay the change fee if you got the standard ticket, and the change is possible. Now, will the agent allow it? That's your luck at some level. There are some agents who are extremely well versed, they'll do it right away. Some agents aren't well versed, but the system allows it, and there's nothing in the Aeroplan program that says you cannot do it. It's entirely does the agent know how to do it. So still a very flexible program, even once you want to bring your changes into play.
I love these like nuanced details, because this was the part when you gave your presentation that I was just mind blown, because there were so many different things, and we just don't have time to go through your whole presentation, because I mean you had slide decks, you had all the different things. So I know we're talking through a lot of this in just conversation, but these are the nuances I think would be great for people to know, because it is really a scenario where you could talk to someone, and it's not as easy as we call hang up, call again when it comes to credit card reconsideration and Chase and Amex, but usually you're only on hold for 5 minutes maybe before you speak with someone versus 5 hours. So I don't know how desperate you want to try to hang up and call again and be on hold again for 5 hours for someone, but it is interesting to know what they're capable of doing and how that ties directly to the skill set of the agent you're on the phone with. But that brings me to kind of this next conversation around changing and canceling flights, because we talked about earlier the fact that there's this expense or a fee to change and cancel. And you and I are talking a little bit offline about a booking that I recently did, and I was curious about what's the best way to proceed. And so for the listeners out there, my wife and I were going to be doing Chile and Argentina for this like Christmas, New Year's time frame. So that's being booked literally right now as we're recording this. And I went ahead and actually found, originally I booked a flight using Aeroplan. It was from DFW to Bogota, and then Bogota on to Buenos Aires, with only an hour layover in Bogota, which I wasn't super excited about. And I don't remember exactly, but let's just say it was somewhere around maybe 60,000 points per person or something like that for business class. Well, thanks to Thrifty Traveler, I saw a alert about LATAM Airways business suites opening up, and ended up researching and found a nonstop from Miami to Santiago, Chile, which is basically a place we were planning on probably flying in or flying out of anyway. And that was a nonstop. So I went ahead and booked that, and that was through, I think it was Air France KLM is how we booked that. So now I have this useless booked flight from DFW to Buenos Aires. So my question for you, Moli, was, is it better to cancel this flight and pay a cancellation fee, or do I just wait, since I know I'm going to use Aeroplan points again at some point in the future, and this flight's not till December, I can probably find some use for these points that are now stuck again at Aeroplan. Is it better to cancel and just get my taxes and points back, or is it better to do a change into whatever other random booking I find, ideally if I find one between now and December?
Yeah, a few avenues you could consider in this particular situation. Canceling your award ticket is the easiest option, quickest option. You can probably do it online. It's going to cost you 150 Canadian plus tax. Of course, can't forget the tax as well. And it's the most expensive option. The slightly more cheaper option, but still not cheap necessarily, is to change your flight to a flexible award booking. So you can change your flight into any routing, make it flexible, and then cancel that ticket. That will bring your change fee down to $100 or $75 in certain situations. So that's a slightly bigger savings on top of your cancellation fee.
So before you continue on there, I want to pause to kind of clarify some things for the newer Aeroplan users out there, because when you go, if you look on Award Tool or Points or Seats on Air or whatever it may be for Aeroplan, and you see a flight that's 70,000 points per person, and you book that, that's usually the one that has a cancellation and a change fee with it. And I'm going to be wrong on the points here, Moli, so feel free to correct me if you need to. But that 70K per person flight might have an option that's like 80 or 85K per person, and that 80 or 85K redemption is a flexible ticket that allows no change fee, no cancellation fee. Now, this goes to your earlier point, Moli. I always book the cheaper one, because most of the time I'm going to fly that flight. It's very rare that I've had to ever cancel. But you could pay more points to not have to pay the cash cost to cancel or change. Now, because of the exchange from Canadian to US dollars, for me, I'd rather save the points and just pay a $75 or $100 or $150 fee. But just want to clarify, when you say we can switch to a flexible fare, that's what you're referring to, is we can switch from that fare that you originally booked or that I originally booked that had a cancellation and a change fee to a ticketed fare of any other destination that does not have a cancellation or a change fee. Just to confirm, that's what we're talking about?
That's right. So it doesn't even have to be the same routing, right? I change it to a Singapore Kuala Lumpur flight and make it fully flexible. And you don't need more miles in your account to make it a flexible booking. You can do the same process with the same miles in your account. And they'll save you $50 to $75 in your change fees processing fee.
Do you have to find a flight that is cheaper points, or doesn't that really matter? You can just change it to anything, and it doesn't really matter if that next thing you change to is more expensive. From flexible or non-flexible to flexible is more expensive. Do you have to find a really like short domestic flight, or as you said, short Asian flight that's going to be less in points to make that happen?
It doesn't matter. I don't have more points in my Aeroplan account more than I actually need typically. So I have to find a cheaper points because I don't want to transfer in more points. But you can do a higher point booking as well. That's not an issue as long as you change it to flexible booking.
Got it.
The third option, which I use probably a lot more than I'd like to admit, is wait for a schedule change to occur. And you have a 1 hour layover in Bogota. Things can happen between now and December. Flights could get canceled. Things could happen. Maybe your layover drops. Wait for that schedule change. As long as you don't need the points immediately, if you end up being misconnecting in Bogota, you can change for free. You can cancel for free at that point in time. The other thing to keep in mind with that schedule change is, I do this a lot. I book flights which I know I will not take, but I do a lot of tight connections far in advance because schedules change all the time. And once your schedule has changed, it is a lot easier to call up Aeroplan and find the more optimal flight options. Of course, assuming you're okay flying Air Canada Metal.
This was the piece that was absolute gold. I'm so glad you said this. A, because I kind of forgot this, and B, I want it immortalized on this podcast forever because this was the piece that I felt was just mind-blowing to know. So basically, just to kind of reiterate what you said, for Air Canada, if they have any change, I believe you had said basically if it changes by even a minute, like whether it's your takeoff time or departure time, landing time, if any of your flights in your routing adjust at all, that gives you the ability to call in and basically change your flight for free, essentially. Is that the case?
Essentially, yeah.
Now, what about a cancellation? Could you cancel for free as well, or you can only change to something else for free?
The official policy is you can cancel for free as well.
So that's absolutely incredible. Now, going back though, I can't, because I have this other flight booked, I can't wait and rely on this misconnection because of the fact that I won't even be on the first flight, right? So I'm going to miss that first flight. But if between now and December, so I have months for there to be a minute change on any of these legs, which I use Flighty. So Flighty tells me the moment a flight is changed and adjusted, plus we get the emails, of course, as well. I basically just need to look out for that. And to your point, if I don't need those points, because if I see for another trip I'm planning that I need a bunch of Aeroplan points, I got to get my points back to do this. But if I can wait it out, I could possibly change and or cancel this completely for free, or ideally just change to a completely different booking altogether and just pay nothing and not have to pay taxes again. I mean, this is the part that I was like, I'm recording this for me, Moli. I know the listeners are going to get value out of this, but I'm recording this for me because I love Aeroplan so much. And I think this was incredible. So that third option, I think, is absolutely, absolutely huge. Now, and you can basically change, like you said, to pretty much any other routing you want. Now, does that again go to the person you speak with on the phone? Is that another one of those, like, your miles may vary depending on your agent?
Absolutely. I want to be cautious, right? That minute schedule change policy, is it documented? It is documented. It's documented on an internal travel agent only site. Now, the agents are humans. They aren't AI. They will be like, you want to change your routing for a 1 minute schedule change? Hell no. That's not going to happen. If they want to do it, they can do it. But as I said, alluded to previously, you can do a lot of things with Air Canada's IT systems. It's entirely based on agent discretion. And if you can convince them to try, they can make it work.
Fantastic, Moli. This is a fantastic breakdown and so much knowledge here, so much information here. I want to get into some of the other nuances as we start to head in the direction of wrapping up. When it comes to finding and booking awards, I mean, you can find Aeroplan on pretty much all of the search tools, award tools. They're super easy to use and to find. They aren't kind of like some of these harder ones to find bookings with. But any tips or tricks you have as far as how far in advance or how close to departure people should be searching, anything like that you think is really specific to Aeroplan that may be of interest to maybe some of the families? We have a lot of families on our show that, have 2-3 plus kids that are trying to book maybe business class for a lot of people. Any specific tips or tricks there?
Yeah, in general, I find if you have larger families, you're either booking, I would say, not the best airlines in the world in advance. You may be looking at more, your Ethiopian, Egypt Air flights more than Lufthansa or Swiss ultimately. Swiss actually does often release a lot of award seats, surprisingly, but it is very sporadic. But when I see a Swiss flight on award redemption, my first question is, are there one seat or nine seats available? And it's normally nine if you find that Swiss availability though. For all other situations, I think you're more reliant on last minute award space because even today, that's when airlines do tend to open up more award bookings than usual. If you're booking, again, I use Air India a lot because that's my preferred carrier, honestly. Air India flights have a limit of one first class and one business class seat per flight. They're going through massive changes right now. There's an opportunity, of course, to combine flights on separate days and just wait for that schedule change. You probably won't get that minute schedule change, but with the Russia-Ukraine war, there's an India-Pakistan issue going on as well. Flights do change very often on Air India. That's an opportunity for you to combine multiple flights across multiple days into one single flight booking using the schedule change capabilities. Here on the West Coast, there's another big opportunity for us right now, which I think nobody really speaks about. Air Canada Rogue is entering the market. Rouge Rogue, I don't know how you want to pronounce it, which is Air Canada's vacation arm. And what I've been doing recently, and I do this a lot on cash tickets because I'm a travel agent primarily, I book people on flights which I know will probably change to Air Canada Rouge at a cheaper cost. The moment the flight changes to Air Canada Rouge, I can make a free change back to any date I want on any flight I want on an Air Canada metal. And it's the same policy on award tickets as well. So, throw in that Rouge flight as well, or throw in that flight that's really susceptible to become an Air Canada Rouge flight, and suddenly your options once again open up in terms of scheduling and changing in availability.
That's awesome. Again, all these nuances I think are going to be super valuable for the listeners and myself as we kind of carve out these different booking strategies with Air Canada Aeroplan. Now, I got to ask you, Moli, because we haven't really covered this at all. I know this isn't really going to be probably super beneficial for most of our listeners because most of our listeners are US based, but we do have listeners from all over the world. And I'm very curious. Of course, Aeroplan has its own levels of status, and I can't reiterate all of them because I'm not an airplane expert, so I'll let you talk through what they are. But what I'm more curious about is not necessarily the status and what you have to do to get the status. What I am more curious about is, are there any benefits or any reasons why someone maybe like myself in the United States might want to think at least about getting Air Canada or Aeroplan status in any of the forms, or getting an Aeroplan credit card or something that might be a little bit contrary or different to what we've been doing for years in the points and miles space?
Yeah, well, to me, the biggest benefit is reduced hold times on the phone. Any status helps. That's a huge change in your experience with Aeroplan ultimately. The other thing is, and this is a new change, you can get up to 20 upgrade credits through credit cards alone that you can then use for business class upgrades. Now, again, is 20 upgrades going to get you much? Probably not. You're almost limited to sort of one upgrade per person on an international flight. Many more upgrades domestically, of course. But Mark, I think, was on a conversation one day, and he said that Air Canada has really good odds for upgrades, much more than United, Delta, or American counterparts. So it is very common for me. I get a bunch of upgrade credits because I'm a frequent flyer of Air Canada. But it is very common for me to make bookings in advance, expecting my upgrade to clear. And I can have multiple bookings. So I might have, bookings across 3 separate days. And I can check the upgrade list, see what my chances are, and then decide which flight I want to take. Of course, do you need flexibility? Yes. But that's also a great way to get that business class seating through upgrades in the elite status on Air Canada, which is obviously a big benefit as well.
Now, is there any benefit that you get from just having the credit card outside of maybe a sign-up bonus, anything from a reduced fee experience or anything like that would make sense for myself to maybe consider the Aeroplan credit card without really needing Aeroplan status? Because I don't really fly Aeroplan or Air Canada Metal almost ever. Actually, I don't know if I've ever actually flown Air Canada Metal. It's always been a partner booking. So anything you have to lean in that direction, or probably just not really?
If you are a very high spender or if you can manufacture spend a lot of money, I believe the number is $1 million a year on Chase. If you can make that spending requirement, you get a buy one, get one free ticket, I believe, across any Air Canada redemption you make on any partner airline, I think up to business class. So suddenly your, 60,000 points to Europe for one person is now 60,000 points for two people to Europe. Huge benefit if you can make that spending. I believe there might be smaller thresholds. I have to double check on it. I'm not that well versed with Chase's Aeroplan. They call it priority rewards in the priority rewards section. But $1 million I know is the holy grail for us, because once you've accomplished that, it is 50% off when you're traveling as a couple.
And that's specifically the Aeroplan Chase credit card, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, realistically, most people are going to be able to get really outsized value spending $1 million if they can on a bunch of other cards than Aeroplan. But I guess if maybe you're a $10 million spender a year on credit cards, dropping $1 million on just one isn't going to hurt, but probably not the best place to focus all of your spending unless you know that you're trying to take a round the world trip or something like that with your spouse, and then you just want to be able to get it for half the award price. That takes a whole level of analysis we don't need to get into in this episode. But before we start to wrap up, Moli, a question as far as any biggest mistakes or problems or just things that you can think of that are either quirks on the Aeroplan side that we haven't mentioned, or when you hear people that are struggling with booking with Aeroplan or strategizing with Aeroplan, anything there that you think would be valuable for the listeners to just be aware of?
Yeah, married segment is a horrible thing for us, I think. It generally works against us, not for us. Keep that in mind. Air Canada is getting more married segment availability, especially on Lufthansa, Swiss, Austrian type partners. That's one frustrating thing.
Can you clarify what a married segment is as well?
A married segment is where, for example, go from, say, New York to Zurich. And you're checking in randomly, you see award availability from New York to Barcelona via Zurich. But you cannot actually book the New York-Zurich flight in isolation. You have to book it with some other city pair instead. In this case, Madrid or Barcelona or whatever. It gets frustrating because you see the flights, it's available if you want to go to a second point in Europe, but not if you want to end your journey in Zurich. Air Canada does that a lot, especially for Lufthansa, Swiss, Austrian type partners, especially in Europe. One thing I noticed recently was that some award space continues to be hidden to public members. You have to call in to get that award space. Ethiopian continues to be hidden, it seems like, from Aeroplan searches. I've had no issues calling in to get that award space, but not available online. And they do it randomly as well. Like, there was a point in time where Air India award space was hidden. I think it's driven by fraud bookings ultimately. So if you do see a flight that's available, see on United, it might be available on Air Canada if you call in, even if it's not available on the app or on the website. And the third thing with Air Canada flight bookings are, just keep in mind the 24-hour call center is horrible to go through because you can't do last minute changes. You can't be going to the airport and making a change to the booking. Last minute award space, it requires calling in. You just can't do it. You have to wait for the call center to open up and then wait God knows how many hours to make the booking before you can go through.
Got it, Moli. So there's a lot of greatness, but a few quirks and things for people to be aware of with Aeroplan. This has been so insightful, Moli. Where can the listeners connect with you? And I know you said that you do flight, bookings for people and such. So can you let the listeners know how they can connect with you further?
Yeah, I'm basically a full service travel agent, so I do both revenue bookings on, hotels, cruises, and flights, as well as award bookings. So I can sort of look at that relationship and optimizing the relationship between your points and cash bookings. You can reach me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Anmolez, ANMOLEZZ. That's two Z's. And I also write for Maple Miles on Travel Update, so you can definitely reach out to me on that as well.
Awesome, Moli. This has been fantastic. We'll link to all those things in the show notes as well. Two questions I always like to ask every guest that comes on the show before we wrap up. The first question is very simply, who next do you think we should have on the show that would bring a lot of value to our listeners that might be in your points and miles connectivity world?
There's a person, Rachel Yuan from Prince of Travel. Actually, she might not be at Prince of Travel anymore. She might be at Points, Miles, and Bling now. She is extremely insightful on British Airways redemptions. And something she's told me, I'm like, are you serious? That's how it works? And it turns out it does work that way. So that's super helpful, I think, for your next podcast.
All right, I'm going to get her on the episode. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do a deep dive on British Airways. So I love that. Perfect, Moli. Last question for you. Any final thoughts, any last bits of nuggets or wisdom when it comes to Aeroplan, Air Canada, redemption, stopovers? We've talked about a lot of really great things today, a lot of things for listeners to come back to, listen to again, to save and to bookmark. Any final thoughts you can think of to leave with the listeners?
Just keep in mind the Aeroplan program was designed for people like us and designed by people like us. So there will always be opportunities, whatever the evaluations come our way, because that's a fundamental operating principle of the Aeroplan program.
I absolutely love it. I love when we think through the design of programs, as you said, that were built for people like us, by people like us as well. That's something to kind of hold to. That's something to have faith and confidence in. As you said, devaluations are going to happen. They've already happened this year. They weren't monumental or catastrophic by any means, but the industry is always changing and cost of travel and airfare is always changing, but we'll keep an eye out for all those things as well. Moli, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I learned so much today and reinforced so much today from your presentation just a couple of months ago that's going to help me and my travels for my wife and I. I'm sure this did the same for the listeners, so thank you so much again for being on the show today.
That's good. Thank you once again for having me.
Absolutely. For listeners out there, if you enjoyed this show today, please make sure to leave it a like. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment, subscribe. Make sure to join our private Facebook group and subscribe for our newsletter as well. More specifically, if you want to get access to our private WhatsApp community that is just points and miles travelers who love to talk through points and miles, talk through credit card strategies, where they're buying certain things, the latest and breaking news that may start and end before it even comes out on our quick hits, all those things are in our WhatsApp community. And so I welcome you there. The only way to get access to that is through either our newsletter and or our Facebook group as well. Don't forget we have our meetup in Miami coming next year, February 5th through 7th. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the show on both audio and YouTube. We are growing on all platforms like wildfire, and it has been fantastic to see. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Moli, I appreciate you being on the show today. Again, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, do all the things. Remember to travel well, live boldly, and we will see you on the next episode. Take care.